Hi, I'm Erin Power.
And I'm Laura Rupsis.
We're certified health coaches, and this is Health Coach Radio.
This podcast is about the art, science, and business of health coaching.
We share our insider tips to help you become a better coach and entrepreneur.
And we interview expert guests to discover how they've made it in this growing field.
It's time for health coaches to make an impact.
It's time for Health Coach Radio.
Our guest today is Diana Bishop, a board-certified health and wellness coach who provides clinical health education and individual health and wellness coaching for Kaiser Permanente employees. Diana is an expert coach who teaches us how coaching can be used effectively in a corporate setting. Facilitating corporate wellness is a goal for a lot of health coaches, and it comes with its own set of difficulties and barriers, which Diana lays bare for us. One of Diana's areas of interest and specialty is in how trauma and adverse childhood experiences reflect in the health of our physical bodies. Like many guests before her who work in the space, Diana patiently explains to us how these stressors show up in our physiology. This is always such an interesting conversation to have that proves that the mind and the body are connected, and you can't work on one without working on the other. We cover a fair bit of ground in this conversation, including ageism in the health and wellness field, how coaching and therapy differ, and what Diana calls clean coaching. I've said it before and I'll say it again. This is what Health Coach Radio is all about, talking to practicing health coaches who are doing it their way and are experts in their field. And there's so much to learn from our peers. Our show's sponsor is Primal Pro. We've educated and certified thousands of health coaches, and we know that one of the greatest hurdles to getting started with a coaching practice is exactly that, getting started with a coaching practice. We want health coaches out in the world making an impact and doing what they do best. So, to save you time, effort, stress, and unnecessary mental energy, we've taken care of the program development for you. Introducing Primal Pro, a fully customizable health coaching app with a 12-week ancestral health program built right in. Simply subscribe to the app, enroll your clients, and the app takes care of nurturing them through 12 weeks of proven diet, movement, and lifestyle education, which lets you do what you do best, the coaching part. Learn more about Primal Pro at primalhealthcoach.com/primalpro. We're on Instagram, and so are you. So as you're listening to your favorite episodes of Health Coach Radio, take a screen grab of your podcast player and tag us in your stories at Health Coach Radio. Don't forget, the show notes for every single episode of Health Coach Radio can always be found at primalhealthcoach.com/radio. Let's get on with the show. Please enjoy this informative and wildly interesting conversation with our guest, Diana Bishop.
All right, good morning. We got Diana Bishop in the house. How are you?
I'm awesome. So glad to be with you ladies.
We are so excited to talk to you. Before we hit record, we had a couple of different ideas, a bunch of different avenues. It's going to be a challenge to try to get through all that in the time that we have, but we'll do our best. So let's start with you. Would you mind giving us, I guess, your origin story, the 3 to 5 minute backstory.
Ooh, my superhero origin story?
Yes, exactly.
Yes, I love it.
The hero's journey. Let's hear it.
So I actually have been in healthcare. I started out back in the late 80s. That's how old I am. I'm 57. I started out working with the homeless mentally ill in Manhattan, working with the HIV population. So when all of that first came about, that was my introduction to working with mental health. And while I was going to grad school. And over the years have sort of evolved as a mental health practitioner. I started out as a drama therapist. I have my master's degree in drama therapy from NYU and came back to California actually. And that was creative art therapy was not, and still sort of has a hard piece being recognized as a valid source of support. And so I had to morph over time to stay employed. And then what happened is I did get called up by Kaiser Permanente. So I work for Kaiser Permanente in San Diego. I've had the good fortune to be with them for 26 years. I started out as a contracted employee providing creative art therapy for a study called the Adverse Childhood Experiences Study, which is a landmark study with Dr. Vincent Felitti and Dr. Robert Anda out of the CDC. And what happened with that study is that Dr. Felitti, who was our manager for the weight loss, I worked at a weight loss clinic. He was trying to figure out why his patients would do really well for a certain amount of time, and then they'd dump out of the program. We wouldn't see them again, and then they'd regain their weight. So I'm really simplifying this process, but basically what he did, he started to have longer term conversations with his patients, and came to find out that most of them had a history of either sexual abuse or childhood abuse early on. And that just sparked a whole host of transitions with how he was working with people. And then he got the support of the CDC, and they found these correlates. There are original 10 questions that help us understand that with each yes answer, where your parents, was anybody in your household addicted? Was there any domestic violence? Was anyone incarcerated? And so on. It's from the ages of birth to 18. The more answers to yes, the higher the risk for premature death, bottom line. So what you can see in the ACE study is that untreated trauma culminates in chronic disease. Why that is because people will utilize substances or behavior patterns unconsciously, just trying to survive. Yeah. So many of those maladaptive, what we call maladaptive behaviors are overeating, substance abuse, domestic violence. All of these types of things that we call maladaptive are really people just trying to get by. So I did that for quite some time. And then I had the opportunity to get out of the clinic. And now what I'm doing, I'm a worksite wellness consultant. I'm a senior learning consultant for Kaiser Permanente, and I'm a health coach, providing one-on-one. We're hoping to do some group coaching this year, but I've been doing that for the last 11 years.
Holy moly, that is a lot.
Yeah. There's a big change too from that trauma-based kind of work you were doing to workplace wellness.
Yes.
I'm fascinated by how something like that came around.
Well, I had done so much work in the weight management program, and really honestly got tired about talking about food. It's just never ending with weight loss, and this, it wasn't growing me at all. And so I had the opportunity to do this whole, is a brand new department for us. So we started from scratch. And that's how I got into health coaching. They wanted us to be certified health coaches, which was really exciting. And what is interesting about this, so they thought that it would be better to have an RD or exercise physiology people on the team. And they ended up there's two of us on our team that are mental health practitioners. And now with the they love us now because boy, aren't we in demand. But what is so interesting is the conversations when I go out, and I used to, before the pandemic, I was teaching webinars on site. We would do all the typical sort of topics that people expect, like healthy eating, back care basics, all that stuff. But what happened in conversations as I was teaching, it was clear people were suffering massive stress, anger, depression, and it manifests itself in our bodies. So that's where I think there's a missing link in our training for some people, is that they don't necessarily understand there's a huge tie-in. Our emotional well-being is our physical well-being. There is no separation.
Yeah, I'm loving learning more about this. Every time we have someone come on who's sort of a trauma-informed practitioner, I want to always ask a ton of questions. As you were sharing the example of working in a weight loss clinic and how some clients or patients would do okay, and then they would vanish off the face of the earth, ghost you completely, gain it all back. I was thinking of clients that I work with, and it's so interesting that you said that you got tired of working in weight loss because you got tired of talking about food, and that's kind of where I'm at in my health coaching career as well. I really don't have a strong draw to take on weight loss clients, but I do have some right now who have that pattern. And what's interesting is that as a nutrition or health coach or nutrition focused health coach, we'll say, well, that's okay. No problem. I'm your coach. I'll support you. Let's just get back on the wagon. We'll just start again. But actually we're missing a really big piece. Now, for a lot of health coaches, myself included, I don't know where to start with that.
I would agree. I would echo that.
So where do we start with that? I mean, is this about like would a health coach like me say, gee, client, I'm wondering if you have any early childhood experience of trauma? Like, what do we do?
No, I think that clearly there is a discomfort even in that idea, right? So that's definitely what we would not want to go for. I think there's an opportunity for every coach to investigate and start doing their own reading, or there are so many good trainings right now because there is an absolute call out in healthcare. Please become informed on mental health on whatever level you can. So there's one-day trainings. I think it should be mandatory in terms of CEUs that we have to have yearly. So there's also an incredible book that I'm just really getting into a lot of the work of Dr. Gabor Mate, who is a Canadian.
Nice.
Have you heard of Dr. Mate?
No.
So oh my gosh. So it's MATE, Dr. Gabor Mate. He is an expert in trauma and addiction. He was a general practitioner for many years and then started to work in Vancouver and doing a lot of work with homeless people who were drug addicted. Anyway, he has this really great book that I highly recommend. I just started to work on it. And it's actually called When the Body Says No.
Oh,
and when familiar. The body says no, it's about exploring the stress disease connection. And there is so much research. The reason why this isn't well known, it's so bizarre to me that even like when I'm speaking with you ladies, that we don't know about Dr. Gabor Mate or Dr. Richard Schwartz, who is the psychologist in charge of what's called internal family systems. And he helps understand, how a client might say, there's a part of me that really wants to do well, but there's another part of me that says, F you.
Yes.
I don't really give up, blah, blah, blah. Okay. Again, I'm simplifying it immensely, but we have to appreciate the psyche. And every one of us has a history. And unless we understand how the inner workings are going, we are missing out on so much. So in trauma-informed practice, to get back to Dr. Mate, he's got some amazing TED Talks. I highly recommend just watching that, Erin. Yeah. He is so passionate about people understanding that addiction is not something that people raise their hand and say, you know what, I want to really mess up my life. I want to be morbidly obese and be miserable. And a lot of the times our coaches are so frustrated with some of their clients because they think they're being lazy or resistant, or they don't have skin in the game, all that stuff. Yeah. It's really has nothing to do with that. That's our own judgment or bias. It's they're suffering. Yeah. And so not that every coach should become a mental health expert, no, but we have to appreciate that we are not just physiologically driven, we are emotionally driven, and our emotions actually are keenly tuned in to our electrical conductivity, our hormones. Yep. So,
well, just to close the loop on that thought, it's there's a discomfort for the coach to appreciate the human body deeper than just a bag of bones and flesh that's earning and burning calories or whatever it might be, a discomfort. But for me, what really lights me up and to learn more about this, and I'm going to devour Dr. Mate's stuff for sure, is that I guess I can't call it empathy, the sympathy or the feelings I have for my clients who are in this thinking, I'm just a failure. Why can't I stick to anything? What's wrong with me? Like, that keeps me up at night. I don't want my clients feeling that way. So for me as the practitioner, I don't need to do it for me. I need to do it for them.
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, you do need to do it for you, Erin.
Yeah, true.
It's so when that I was sharing with Laura some of my thoughts about coaching, and that I think sometimes we don't coach clean. Did you remember me saying that in my email? I think that we have to really consider our own process and history when we walk into that, or we're virtually in a session. And if I am not coming in clean, if you will, for my client, then I'm leaking in my expectations or my bad day or what have you. And so often it's what we want for the client, and that's just not how coaching works.
Right.
Motivational interviewing is all about the spirit of MI. It's about them finding their own agency and their own ability and strength. I'm here as a guide.
Yep.
And so if I'm imposing myself and what I think nutrition should be or whatever, that's when the frustration and the breakdown goes. It's because we are not in sync.
All right. How do you, so here's I don't know, maybe it's too big of a question, but a lot of what we speak to in this, what we are speaking to in this conversation around mental health, and someone who has a background in this, I would love your opinion on how coaches can help separate their role as a coach from what really is starting to smell and feel a lot like therapy. Because there's a fine line there. Like I always, and look, my hairdresser sometimes says, I feel like a therapist because people talk to me. So there's a fair amount of, whether you're a bartender or a hairdresser or someone that spends one-on-one time in conversation with an individual person where you invite conversation and want to know more about them. It's a joke, but it's not funny. When we're talking here as a profession and as health coaches, understanding where that line is and how we can recognize it. And once we recognize it, pull back towards coaching and how it's different than what a therapist might do. Do you have some thoughts there?
It's interesting. I just became board certified this last year, and there are a whole host of questions about that, because from an ethics point of view, it is, prime number one piece. I believe that really, in terms of what you're asking, I think it's interesting because it is a very fine line. This relationship that when we walk with someone through their journey, it's very emotional, right? And there has to be a certain level of trust. The difference is, and I'm just reflecting on having done both roles. Right. The difference is I'm listening as a coach and reflecting back to them. I'm not giving them any advice. I am not diagnosing. I'm not doing any of those things. I'm listening and I'm supporting. Yeah. As a therapist, I am the subject matter expert. Mm-hmm. It is my responsibility and my due diligence to make sure, that person is safe, that I have a full history. I mean, there's so many other pieces to it. So therapy has a whole different level of responsibility that's not just implied, but required. Mm-hmm. In coaching, that's why I wanted to I was tired of being responsible in that way. I carried that stuff heavily, sort of similar to Erin, not being able to sleep at night, sometimes concerned. Mm-hmm. I don't have, as a coach, the beauty of coaching is that we are walking together. Let's see where it goes. I'm here to hear. You're just letting me know what you need, and we'll keep moving. Let's see how it goes. I'm not responsible for your success. I am not. You are responsible for your success. And I think that's where coaches get, it's that people pleaser in us, that's the caregiver in us that thinks that, and that's where we go wrong.
Yeah. There's also there's a lot of unlearning that needs to be done in the health coaching field. So we're all board certified here. We all did that, very intense educational experience and that big exam, and exploring the motivational interviewing piece, which you mentioned earlier, I think is so interesting. And so here's the backstory. I teach the course that our school runs that qualifies people to sit the board exam. So I'm the teacher for that course. And one thing that I have to frequently help my students unlearn is that they're not the teacher or the teller, right, or even the boss or even the leader of the relationship. And that is actually very hard for coach appreciate and unlearn. This idea that the client arrives to the conversation with expertise, and we are nurturing their expertise out through just open-ended questioning, reflection. When it comes to trauma, though, this is where I'm hung up.
Okay.
Like I'm speaking to my client, I'm using the motivation, trying to tease out what is known from within them, what is thought, felt, and known. How do I know if they know?
They don't.
Okay. They don't know.
Mm-mm.
So how do we?
Great question.
Yeah. So I love that. I'm going to tell you a very sweet story about a coaching session that I had with a young man. And it was so interesting. This is crazy. I do laser coaching. I get 3 sessions. That's it.
Wow. Laser coaching.
Laser coaching. It's 3 sessions or one a week for 30 minutes. That's the contract that we have with this one company. So anyway, sat down, and this young man he was so receptive to the experience. He started just to tell me some background stuff. I started to ask some questions about what was going on, what were obstacles that he had to his health. And he proceeded to share about his father, who's mentally ill and drug addicted and And then I said, okay, so what's your goal? And he wanted to work on his weight and exercise. And then I said, so what would that look like? And he goes, I don't really know. I've never done it. Right. And then I said, well, a lot of it is also a translation issue. Have you ever heard of trauma and adversity and how that changes your neurology? And he was like really intrigued. Like I starting to talk to him about something that was sort of interesting to him that made him feel less like a failure. Mm-hmm. I translated for him very quickly the fact that his brain is more hardwired than normal for problems, right? So we are hardwired as human beings for problems because we're survivalists, right? In trauma, that thing is on all the time, and it cannot process logic at all. It's all emotion. Mm-hmm. So his piece there, I was trying to help him understand, guess what? We get to work together on, if you're interested, on learning a new language. What do you think about that? Would you like to learn the language of wellness? And he said, that sounds cool. I want to try that. But I think because he had no understanding, it's not his fault that he's unable to do these things. It's his neurology. We're trying to help bring those neurons back together.
Yeah.
Yeah. Gosh, we've interviewed so many people that talk about this sort of neurologically, this learned path. Mm-hmm. And the more time we spend in that path, and the more time we tell the same story and even invite the same experiences, the deeper those grooves get.
Yep.
And to try to help our clients release the guilt they have for not being able to get out of that groove, because boy, it's deep, right? And we have to work together, actively work together to try to forge a new path. And guess what? It's hard. Mm-hmm. There's a reason why change is hard. Mm-hmm. And I think if you can frame this conversation in a way that helps release the guilt and that sense of, well, it's my fault, but allow them to realize that they do have ownership and there's something that they can do.
And there's the rub, if you will, is that once we become, I think Maya Angelou said something, once we know better, we need to do better.
Yeah, right.
Yeah. I think that for so many people, once they get to to hear it and sort of understand it, then there's the big piece of, oh my gosh, I really do need to do something about this. Or am I? Conversely, there's the ambiguity in the am I?
Mm-hmm.
Maybe I don't want it, maybe in my heart of hearts, I don't want to do this. So that's a tough piece. And I think really, again, getting back to the importance of separating between coaching and therapy. When is it time to refer somebody?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. When is it time? Is it when you feel like you've hit your wall of understanding? And
no, I think that if we do see somebody who is clearly has a traumatic past or has a history, and they're willing to share with you that they have been diagnosed in the past, our due diligence, are they currently in treatment? If they're not currently in treatment, how are they feeling? I think we need to assess where they're at and clearly know what we're capable of doing. It's, obviously my subject matter expertise would allow me to kind of have further conversations. If that's not your thing, clearly we need to get that person or support them in saying, hey, you know what, this is outside my wheelhouse. And you'd be, my recommendation is that it sounds like there's some unfinished work here. And I don't have that language for you to share.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. I'm in my mind crafting the email I'm going to send to this client I keep thinking of, and it will say something like, this is something along the lines of like, this is a shortcoming of mine. I think I believe that you could use some help with this, but also in my head, I want it to not be a shortcoming of mine. So I'm very curious to dig into, like, from your perspective, education streams or courses you might recommend. Obviously, you recommended Dr. Matei, and you also name dropped Dr. Richard Swartz. But you did say also that you think mental health training should be mandatory, and there are opportunities, educational ones out there. So do you have any you can suggest?
Wow. That's a good piece. There's a company called Mental Health First Aid. They do training. A lot of corporations are using them. Mental Health First Aid is a well-known product, if you will, and it provides introduction to how to identify if somebody is expressing suicidality, what to do, how to use resources, how to communicate with somebody who's struggling. So Mental Health First Aid is a really great one. I also think, the Wellness Council of America has a whole host of resources. So it really just depends on what your interests are and where you're located, what you might want to do. Obviously, everything's virtual as well, but I would just say, because the company that I work for does utilize Mental Health First Aid. So that's what I'm familiar with.
That sounds great. That sounds great.
That's really helpful, though. I mean, I think here's a question that I don't know, maybe it will help Erin here, but in this sort of handoff. So you're working with a client, and you've realized at some point there's no amount of open-ended questions creating space and reflection that's going to move you forward. And you as a coach are thinking there's more here that is just beyond my, to use a term you use, language, training, expertise, license, what have you. And you really feel the need to make a referral. How do you do that without the client feeling abandoned or passed on? Or that's, because my gut would be, I'm here to coach you, but there's an aspect of what I think you need that's beyond me that I would love to encourage you to explore. I'm still here to support you. I'm still your coach. Yeah. I'm not letting, but do you have some advice on how to handle that? Because sometimes folks really aren't coachable until they've gotten the help they need.
They're not. Yeah. Exactly. And I sort of want to grab something that Erin said, because I know that other people probably feel the same way. You use the word shortcomings, and I just want to support you in hearing that again, if you think about that statement, it's you owning somehow that you've missed the boat or you failed or something. And truthfully, did you raise your hand and say, you know what, I don't want to be capable of dealing with this issue. You didn't, that's not, no, I mean, given the information, which you would like to get, you'll be in that position. So I just want to be supportive there, because I think a lot of coaches might drag their heels to do the conversation that you just mentioned, Laura, because they feel like somehow or another, I'll get it. I'll figure it out all on my own. There's, it's me missing the boat. Okay.
Right.
But I think, so I believe that first session that we have with our clients, going through the paperwork, making sure it's clear, what is my responsibility? What is your responsibility? If I note, I think we need to be clear in that session that I believe that that our emotional well-being is going to be a part of this whole process. I don't think it lives in a silo. So if I name it at the beginning as a partner in this conversation, so you've come to me, client, to work on weight management, wanting to let you know that we're going to be exploring all the different components that participate in somebody, with somebody in terms of weight management. And what I know to be true about long-term weight management is that when we have these different aspects of your life running in a smoother pattern, you will feel a lot less frustrated, hopefully, and you'll see changes within yourself. But that's going to require us to have conversations that are a little bit beyond just talking about how many fat grams you had today.
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to be asking you about your stress level. I'm going to be asking you about your sleep and your relationships, because that will help me. Part of my work is I'm a detective with you. We need to figure these things out. So knowing that there may be a time that happens as we're going through this, that it may be beyond what is something that I'm able to support you in. My scope of practice, just like a medical doctor, is this. If I feel that it's beyond that, I would like to refer you to like a kidney doctor. Do you see what I'm saying? Using language that they're more used to, or the dermatologist.
Yeah.
I'm not abandoning you. I'm still your GP.
Mm-hmm.
But we want to see what's best for you.
Yeah.
And I'm not going anywhere. If we need to separate out while you're getting that extra support, that's fine, but I'm not going anywhere.
Great. So you are suggesting that this all comes into the client agreement.
Yes.
This is how this relationship works.
Yeah.
And really setting that out up front. Hopefully coaches are doing that. And if you're sleeping on your client agreement, my advice would be just exactly how you articulated it, Diana, is like, it doesn't have to be this legalese weird contract. It's like, here's what I'm bringing this relationship. Here's what you bring to the relationship. Here's what we're going to work through. Here's how it's going to go. Here's some contingencies if necessary, and just being really real in that language. That's great.
I think it provides a sense of comfort and clarity for folks when they're coming. I mean, they're vulnerable when they come to see us, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, they really are. I and I really appreciate the pep talk you gave about my shortcomings. Thank you very much. Do you know, want to hear something really crazy? The reason why I feel like this is a shortcoming is because, and I've said this on every episode where we ever spoke about trauma, is I don't think I've had any. Right? Is that possible?
It's your experience, Erin. So if that's how you experience your life, there's no judgment in that. I think it would be remiss of me to kind of just say on the spot, hey, is that possible? As a matter of fact, no, Erin. I think you probably got a whole lot of no.
Right.
I think that we dismiss a lot of different things that have happened in our lives as it was not that big. You know how people, they just went, yeah, I got over it. It was okay. Somebody died, but I figured out how to, so it's not that you haven't had trauma. I think it's how you frame your experience.
You just made me think, because one of the things that I've really loved that you've articulated that's making this really make sense for me is this idea that the body is wired for survival, which it is, and I speak to that all the time in my coaching program. But the body, the brain that has gone through adversity and trauma is hardwired extra for survival. It's in survival mode. That's interesting because in a previous episode years ago, we had a gal on who did EFT technique. And she took us through a session during the episode. And I was like, okay, I was super open-minded to it. And again, I came into the relationship saying, I don't think I have any trauma, but I had this vision of a young me busting my butt at a job to try to get ahead and make a name for myself, and abandoning my entire social development in my 20s and teens and 20s because the most important thing was to achieve and be somebody. That's kind of, when you think about it from the perspective of survival, I was in like that was a really important part of my sort of survival development. I don't know, like that's sort of I guess my small t trauma. That's why that kind of thing counts, I suppose, right? Not that I'm trying to get validation on my traumas here. I'm just
I think you're trying to sort of sort it out. I also want to throw out to you all that there's a thing called, of course, you've heard the secondary trauma, which is witnessing either on television or through the news, what have you. When we see human suffering, which they love to show us now, because if it leads, it leads. We're watching people die, and there'll be this little streamer that says to tell you ahead of time, content is sensitive, blah, blah, blah. You might want to turn away or whatever, but we don't.
No.
We don't. And our brains are not sophisticated enough to know that that's not happening to us in this moment.
Right.
It takes in that information. So when we see human suffering, we are not untouched by it, which I know you know that, but I think we don't appreciate this last 20 months, the suffering that continues day in and out, and this rage. There's rage out there. And I think that, yes, in terms of the ACE study, which is 0 to 18, because of the developmental processes of the brain, but we are human beings, and we go through seasons of our lives, and certain seasons of our lives are more difficult than others. Yeah.
Yeah.
Right. Absolutely. Look, and I would say, Erin, to your point, just because as we look back during that developmental period, and we can't really identify a period where we may have felt traumatized, or just based on our own definition of what we believe trauma to be or what have you, that doesn't mean that there weren't literally sort of personality and mindset and life defining moments during that period of time, some that were good and some that were not good. You might not have left it feeling traumatized or as though you experienced a trauma based on whatever internal definition you think that would be, but they defined you. And they defined your habits and your tendencies and the way you view the world. We talk about this all the time, particularly around women and body image.
Yeah.
Right. And how one offhand comment could have been made by someone in a role that impacted you so deeply that somehow led you to believe there's something wrong with your body.
Yep.
Right. You might not walk away feeling that was trauma, but it definitely defined your relationship with food, the decisions you make, how you view and internally feel about this sort of physical manifestation of who you are. So I mean, I guess I would love, from your point of view, Diana, when you're dealing, and it's kind of a pivot, kind of not a pivot. Like, so you're doing these laser sessions and you're how do you, holy cow. So you have this beautiful young man that clearly is open to this and lays this bomb on you, right? And you've got 3 sessions to try to help him move the needle for himself, I gather, right? Gosh, how does something like that work? Like, so this just happens to be a contract with this employer that they want to be able to offer to their employees, but so I would, first of all, love to find out a little bit more about your corporate wellness work, but also kind of these, a lot of people find ourselves in a position with clients where we don't have like an hour to unwind stuff. We've got a very brief window. What does that look like, and how do you navigate that?
Right. So at Kaiser Permanente, so we're obviously a very large health organization, and the division that I work through is called the Center for Healthy Living. Used to be called Health Education, right? But we are now a separate team called Worksite Wellness, and so we are partnered to go out to our larger Kaiser employer groups that have hired Kaiser to provide on-site services. Used to be on-site, right? And consult in terms of promoting and deciding wellness programming for the year. So in terms of the coaching piece, we have telephonic wellness coaches, right? Kaiser Permanente has telephonic wellness coaches for all our members. They are my counterparts in Pasadena. But there's a couple of us on our team. There's two of us that actually continue to do coaching. A lot of employer groups, I think, for a while got burnt out on doing wellness, and now they're coming back to it and realizing how important it is. So in terms of the coaching piece, the reason I get only 3 sessions with folks is because the employer still has this narrow view of the person needs to be working. They can't be off of work to do this, that, and the other. And it is what it is. So I utilize, I don't know, are you all familiar with Dr. Michael Arlosky from Real Balance Wellness?
Yep.
So he is my mentor. I went through his program for certification. I utilize his wheel of wellness, coaching wheel wellness as my first. That's how we get things going. So I understand within a very short period of time what's going on in terms of energy. To answer your question, Laura, I think what happens in those, I have no fantasy about moving the needle. I have no fantasy about moving the needle. My greatest hope is that in those sessions that people feel heard and respected, and maybe that will be a fertilizer, if you will, for them to seek help. Yeah. I'm just the beginning. Obviously, I can't get anything done in 3 sessions. Are you kidding? But at least if I can be a positive experience, people will be interested in using the minimal energy they have left. Do you see? A lot of it has to do, our people are tired, they're burnt out. So I really, my major focus is that this time, you and I together be one of inspiration and hope. And if I'm able to achieve that, then I've had a good day.
Oh, I love that. Because, and I don't want to cast any judgment on corporate wellness programs, but I've been a part of a few of them as well. And kind of what you described, which is like, we want to offer this to the staff, but like, we got to get them, they need to be sitting at their desks. So let's, it does end up being kind of sometimes, the corporations I worked at, it's kind of swept under the rug. Like, we're just doing this to be nice, but we don't really, so, but the way you described that, which is for maybe the first time, this person has been really listened to and given a platform to think and feel into their body or whatever they're experiencing, can be a real catalyst for change outside of the organization. I think that's a pretty cool way of looking at it.
It is, my time during the last 2 years, I've been doing it virtually. I didn't think, I'm old school. I like being with people in the same room. I was pretty resistant at first, but you know what? I am complete convert. I love doing this. It's worked just great. Yeah. And so well, so that I actually, the NWI is going to have their conference in Orlando this year, and they did a call for paper. I actually put in a proposal because the work that I'd done this last year had gone so well virtually, and I had enough data to finally put together to show that really what they'll initially come in, it's always either weight loss, exercise, or nutrition. And when we get down to it, it's stress, sleep, and so good stuff.
That's so, Erin and I both came from the corporate space, like just worked for a corporation, worked in sort of that kind of a role before we transitioned to this. And the role that I played and many of my peers, very type A personality, very driven, that the idea that stress and mindset and sleep were the most important would never enter their heads in a million years. For some reason, that's a sign of weakness.
Mhm.
That all I need to do is eat the right things and exercise. I mean, I think this permeates across the entire sort of corporate culture for the most part. And I think this is probably when done properly, this is the biggest contribution health coaches can make to this narrative,
Mhm.
right? Get them out of it's not about the diet. Look, food matters. It healed me. Literally changing what I ate healed me, was a game changer. But in order for me to make that change, I needed a huge change in mindset myself. This, like, I've had it. I'm done. Something's got to change. I'm going to take ownership of this because whatever I'm doing is not working. And I was finally willing to go outside of what I always thought was true to learn something new. So even in the case where food is what fixed me,
Mhm.
the mindset change had to come first. So from a standpoint of communicating with individual clients, or in this case, large corporate wellness organizations, I would love to, I don't know, maybe it's just brainstorming together or getting your thoughts on how we kind of change that narrative.
I think a lot of corporations are on their knees right now with what's going on.
Yeah.
And they are begging for help. This burnout and the great, what are they calling it? The great, where everybody's leaving their jobs.
The great resignation.
Resignation.
Oh,
What, and see if you agree with me on this one, but I am so over the fact that we've got HR people who keep pushing out all this information about, do the EAP, use our resource, blah, blah, blah. And they themselves have never availed themselves of that and are leaking all over their issues, their uncared for selves are so clear that there's this separation and standard that, of course, leadership has this expectation. They want you to do this, but they're not doing it.
right.
And we can't, it's a cultural piece here. So I think that when we create these environments where people are banding together in wellness in all different ways, and it's not just, the sexy people doing, getting all the point, how we do those darn challenges, which I hate.
Oh.
A team again, hey, because competition is the way to go. No, it is not the
No.
way to go. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
But when we get back to the basics, and I love the blue zones for this, when we allow people space to rest, space to connect, space to be spiritual, it is what matters. And this is where we understand my big tagline in because I teach webinars day in, day out all the time now, is you are not a machine. You are not a microprocessor. You are organic material. You need sunlight. You need minerals. You need love and care. That's the shift that has to happen, especially if people are going to stay remote workers. We've got to find a way to help build their community.
Do you think the remote worker, because we know that the in-office experience is pretty damaging, but what is the remote worker thinking and feeling, and what are their struggles? Disconnection, I guess. So social disconnection. That's a big part of the blue zone piece that I loved, is like, wow, these folks are living forever because they're actually with each other.
Yeah. There's this struggle because if you've got little children that you're responsible for, there's no separation. There's all this extra stress on parents right now, I think, working remotely. I also think there's that how can I put that, isolation. So if you had somebody, I work with a lot of public entities, and I'm not sure if you're familiar with this. It's so interesting that there are these little folks, God bless them, they're little worker bees, who never get a light shined on them, right? And they go through 20, 30 years and retire from that company. And they're just always by themselves. They're just, and I think it gets so much worse. The only contact some of these people ever had were their work relationships.
Yeah.
And so when we keep them at home, which, you know, I don't want to complain because this is working well for me right now, but it's not for everyone. And I think that just like social media is really weird because I can say and do whatever I want in certain ways. I think emails, corporate emails have changed. Our Zoom meetings, I can turn my camera off if I want to. I mean, I present in a way that is inauthentic.
Yeah.
It is not my true self. And so there's this disconnect that's even stronger.
Yeah, I was thinking, this is just like a kind of offshoot comment, but just because you mentioned Zoom meetings, and there's something so exhausting and unnatural about a Zoom meeting. If you've got 10 people in a boardroom, you're looking at the person who's talking, you're looking at the person who's talking, you're looking at your notebook. But when you're on a Zoom meeting, you're looking at everybody at the same time and also looking at yourself to make sure you don't look stupid. Like, it's so, I don't even know how our brains our brains are amazing. Like, just shout out to the brain for for this complete paradigm shift that we've been through, honestly. Anyway.
You know, I think you're right about corporations, and at this point kind of being on their knees and really at a loss for how to, first of all, possibly bring people back, those that don't want to come back, but also at the end of the day, this sense of isolation and the one thing, for good or bad, well, there's many things, but one of the things that the pandemic, I think, has really highlighted is the need for connection. And really highlighted how, you know, many of us, I think, romanticize the idea of being able to just have everything delivered from home and not having to get out of my pajamas all day and not having to fight traffic. There's something about getting out into the world and living life around other humans that we took for granted. That I think on the trip back, if we do this right, it can be so much better.
Because you all are so much better. Younger folks, younger people, you are so much better at expressing what you expect and what you need. Folks in my generation and older, we have the mentality we're lucky to have jobs. That's not at all what's happening in millennial life. Millennial life is all about quality of life. Very different. And that has changed, I think, HR immensely as well. Got to keep our millennial people.
Yeah. And you know what, you're right about, I think, what you're saying about a lot of the HR folks not walking the walk, talking the talk, and availing themselves of this. And my role at our school is, I mean, I talk to people all day that are curious about health coaching and want to know more about it and are considering taking a course. And the number of people, first of all, I talk to people every day that are looking to change jobs, but these are, I'm talking high level people, deeply rooted in careers that they've loved that are now done. And, you know, a huge segment of healthcare people, huge segment of nurses, doctors, things of that nature. But, you know, I'm hearing this, folks who's like a lot of salespeople, you know, that are just kind of like, I guess the message, I think, of what I'm hearing is life's too short.
Yeah.
Life's too short. And I want to do something that has meaning to me. I've been in this role for our school for a number of years. I always heard it, but it's so much louder now than it ever was. It's not just, hey, I've always had an interest in health and wellness. You know, what could I do? It's, oh no, the system's broken. That's what I hear. The system's broken, and whatever system they're referring to. And I want to help fix it. My little corner of the world. So, I guess from a question that I have for you about sort of that concept from a corporate point of view, or just health coaching generally. How much are you hearing about this disconnectedness, discontentedness with work and their profession, and kind of what to do there, and the types of because I hear it from my clients. I know Erin hears it from her clients about the role that work plays in someone's own like unwellness. How do you balance that in working with companies, corporations?
Yeah, it's an interesting piece that you're asking, because a lot of the time we are deployed to companies that we know are just really high stress anyway. And you have to I have to sort of temper some of the conversation, because there's that, when I start to leak out or not coach clean is when I go, this job really sucks. You need to leave it. It's not good for you. It'd be fun to have a session and conversation about the fantasy conversations you wished you could have had with your, that would be a lot of fun. But I think a lot of the people that I'm seeing are over 50, because their health is so bad now.
Yeah.
And a lot of them are feeling that life has failed them. They're stuck. Again, the mentality of folks in my generation is very different. But I think this pandemic, another silver lining is that it's got older people thinking as well.
Oh, good.
This is the time. Let's go to it. But I think also women, our roles have shifted so much over time. And I think that I'm just going to share that I have a struggle of my own trying to figure out, where do I fit in? Where do I fit in now in terms of, is my voice relevant? So if I'm feeling this way about starting to feel brushed off because I'm older, and I've had ageism straight in my face many times. How are many of the clients that I'm working with? Why is it? No wonder. Can you imagine being an older person going into a doctor who's seeing way too many people, and they are told, look, you're just da 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 da, you need to do blah blah blah, and that sense of guilt and shame.
Yeah.
And then they're unsatisfied in so many ways. How in the heck are they supposed to make a difference in terms of their own health? But to your point, the exciting thing is, did you see the email that came out by the board that they're working with to get CBT codes?
Yeah.
So I think there's a whole new energy going to be coming, because we know if we put a coach in primary care in a pod and have them seen either before or after, great stuff's going to happen. If you put a coach in a diabetic clinic, great things are going to happen. It's the people want relationships. It's not my technical skills. Yes, it's important.
Yeah.
But if I can have a relationship with somebody who's excited about getting well, and you're going to help me translate my experience, let's go.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, when I hear you talk about the sort of these age groups, right? So people 50 and older, your age and older, 57 and older. I think they go to they don't feel well and they go to the doctor. Do you know what I mean? Like, that's their understanding of that trajectory. I don't feel good, I'm going to go to the doctor. And then if the doctor's brushing them off and there's just no actual care happening at the doctor's office, then I think they do leave feeling like completely defeated. Like, oh, I guess this is just how aging is going to be for me. And there's versus maybe the millennial who is more empowered right out the gate to, I'm going to go find the coach. I'm going to go find the expert. I'm going to seek out what I need. The older generation just never was never conditioned to that. So I think that these codes, the CBT codes, are bringing coaching into the medical space is really going to be impactful for this generation for sure.
And I hear you around this concern around ageism. Again, my role at what I do. I talk to people 60 and older looking to become health coaches every day. And every once in a while, more than once in a while, I get the question, hey, is it too late? And I'm like, are you kidding me? This is an entire generation that needs you more than, I mean, so to your point, my dad he's baby boomer, he's, how old am I? I just turned 50, my dad's 72. No, he's older than that. He was 24. So 74 years old. And he has been so conditioned to just call the doctor, do what the doctor says, and never ask questions. This is another, I guess, potentially silver lining of the pandemic, is more people are starting to ask questions like, hey, something's not adding up, so to speak, right? But I do think, now that I think I know, this generation needs someone behind them to advocate for their own sense of self and self-worth and their own worthiness, to ask questions and demand better than the lazy healthcare of, oh, your total cholesterol is 240. You need to be on a statin.
Yeah.
That is lazy medicine. I'm sorry, you deserve better, because these things are not harmless, but my dad does not feel empowered to ask those questions. Interestingly, my mom has always had a problem with like hospitals, authority generally, but even her, in her weaker moment when she got really sick, she needed an advocate to stand and fight for her. And I think this is a phenomenal role for health coaches, is to stand and be the advocate for this age group that has so much still to give to our community at large. And they are being, to a certain degree, to use your term, brushed off. In favor of what? In favor of whom?
Something that is shinier, faster, sleeker, sexier, all of that. I want to sort of layer this conversation with social determinants of health, because I think the social justice and fairness and equality, all that's come up, right? We've got new positions in corporations that are all about making sure that we're culturally competent. I think coaching really needs to tie into being culturally sensitive. And to your point, Laura, I think if we look at folks that are older, they have their own sort of language and being and expectations. This is true in the Latinx community, LGBTQ. I mean, we have to really understand, what are their languages? How do they maneuver? What do they need from us? Because to be honest with you, it can be extremely uncomfortable to try to coach with somebody in just the two. I'm clearly a white woman, and what the heck am I doing coaching you, right? So as a coach, I think that's an interesting conversation, is when you're in a conversation with someone who may have that defensive piece for good reasons, how do we coach around social issues? I don't know if that's come up with any of you or not.
Well, obviously it comes up when you're as part of the board exam process and the educational process. And so what's really wild, and I'm almost like ashamed to say this, but I'll just say it, not ashamed, but we're all learning. In creating the educational curriculum to satisfy the educational requirements for the board exam, that was the first time I dug into it, social determinants of health. And I was mortified. It's like, I'm a privileged white woman who lives in a cushy neighborhood with, in a whatever, right?
Right.
Some of the things I've asked of my clients are so privileged. Like, hey, source grass-fed meat, okay? Grass-fed, grass-finished, not grain-finished, right? Like, if you can afford chicken nuggets at the food fair, that's fine. You know what I mean? Like, it was a lot of the food quality stuff, and just go for a walk. Well, there's no sidewalks in my neighborhood, or I'm in a wheelchair or something. Like, just mortified at some of the, but what I think is interesting is, what I think is exciting is that we're hearing more and more and more about this. I feel like, to your point, like in corporate settings, we now have the inclusion, the chief inclusion officer, the diversity and equity officer. And I love that. I'm seeing it in my social feeds more, which is really delightful, because social media is pretty whitewashed. At least mine is.
Oh yeah.
So the conversation's happening, and I guess I would implore coaches, I'm always quick to just like acknowledge where my shortcomings are, as I have done 10 times on this conversation, but with the desire to learn and grow and change and evolve.
Mhm.
And I think that the social determinants piece is where many coaches need to evolve.
Mhm. Absolutely. And especially as CPT codes develop, especially as we start to see health coaches permeate into other sources of care that are available to folks that might just not everybody has the financial fortitude to pay out of pocket to work one-on-one with a health coach. That is a tremendous, blessing, right? And so the fact that health coaches are permeating their way through and working at the VA, working with insurance companies, and working within a clinical practice where there's greater access to things like this, it's going to become more and more obvious. We give a lot of lip service to the idea of meeting the client where they're at.
Mhm.
And it really needs to be felt internally and really understanding where this client is right now and what are you capable of. And let's nurture that little seed and move forward, and I'm here to support you, and what do you need from me as your coach to
Mhm.
help empower you to sort of find that. Look, I see it even in my own community, even though I live in a nice little subdivision here in Florida. But the thing that broke my heart was the fact that, we had to put together a food drive so that because when schools were shut down, they had no food.
Mhm.
They had no food, right? And so this is the community coming together to try to feed these children and make sure that they had, I'm saying this in air quotes, what they needed to get
Mhm.
through this. And I live in Florida. Schools have been open. I can't even imagine what this is like in other areas. And so for the standpoint of health coaching moving forward, and I heard you mention it, and Erin mentioned it, sort of removing our own bias, right?
Mhm.
Removing our own sort of frame of reference and coming to this from I guess, a clean place, right? A blank slate, and sort of what we're working with. I, I love the fact that the language is even there,
Right.
in our realm, because it's really not in a lot of other health related fields. The fact that this is a goal, we're not all good at it. I'm not good at it all the time. I'm still at a point where I'm very conscious about it
Mhm.
and have to be. But I love the fact that this is even written into a national organization that's here to support health coaching and to find a way to make it available for all. And from the standpoint of whether it's those who are, financially unstable, or depending on where they are from a cultural point of view, you're right. Trying to understand the language of somebody who's not like me is hard, you know, and recognizing that I still, as a coach, have a lot of work to do. And I think we all need to recognize that quite a bit. And, I guess my question for you there is from a perspective of coaching and kind of what you're doing now. What are you still working on? What would you love to see happen for yourself and for coaching moving forward?
Thank you for asking that. I love that. You know, I've been, like many people, reflecting over the last 2 years, trying to figure out what's going on. And I'm so confused because of social media and companies, so on, in terms of wanting this. We provide a service, and then clearly that's not what they wanted. I don't understand what people's expectations are right now.
Yeah.
And so my questioning about myself right now is, am I missing the point? Am I just so scope locked on what I think needs to happen because of all my years of service that I'm not hearing? So to answer your question, I'm working on my listening. Can I open my ears up more? Can I allow myself to understand even the dialogue that's going on in my own head, and appreciate without judgment? That's what, in terms of mindfulness, I'm doing a lot of classes on mindfulness, And so helping people understand there's going to be this weird stuff that's going on in your head. We have to allow that without judgment so it can clear out and keep moving on. I don't want to become stuck. I don't want to become irrelevant. I want to be part of what's happening. And I don't know how that's going to happen per se. My one way of getting closer to that was to put in that proposal for the NWI in hopes that maybe I can be a part of the conversation. In this part of my career, I'm really looking to I'm doing more mentor work, Laura. I'm mentoring new coaches and so on. So I'm doing a lot of soul searching, just like everybody else, I think.
Wonderful. It's wonderful to hear. And I have to commend you and thank you, because the conversation we had with you today probably has a lot of coaches doing some soul searching. What little ruts have we been stuck in? And where is the real opportunity to help? Because it is ever changing. So we need to be open to that as well.
I don't know if you're doing this with your students. I have a fantasy of coming up with a collective of coaches and allowing for these conversations, like having that fantasy conversation. Don't you wish you could have told your client this? Or how are you managing? Because to your point, we have biases. We're not going to erase our biases. I think that people, when I'm coaching them, appreciate when I'm just transparent and say, you know what? I'm not real familiar with this. You tell me what I need to know. Tell me what I need to know. Because clearly, I don't say I'm white or anything like that, but we've had different experiences. That's not going to go away, but if I'm aware of it, I think there's certain times when we as coaches can be vulnerable in those sessions, and it helps the client. They're like, oh, wow. Okay. That's kind of cool.
Yes.
Yeah.
It's that partnership feel, not the teacher, student, boss, subordinate feel, which is really important. The rally cry to grow and evolve is so crucial. And I just want to finish with a small anecdote of a coach that I took through this coaching, this course that I teach for the purpose of the board approval. And the coach emailed me to say, I don't think this course is for me. All this motivational interviewing and letting the client lead. That's not what my clients need. And I was like, tell me more about that. Well, my clients just need to be told what to do. No, I'm sorry. No, but if you're a coach and you think, and this is my rally cry, my personal opinion, if you're a coach who thinks my job is to go in and tell people what to do, please rethink that. Please evolve this profession. Although even just, 4, 5, 6 years ago, and Laura and I started in it as educators, it was so fledgling. It is now huge and ready for its next renaissance. And so please be open to rolling with it as it ever evolves. I think that's one of our responsibilities.
Oh yeah. You're absolutely right, Erin. And look, I my answer, or what would have, I don't know if I would have said it, but in my head, it would have been, then you don't want to coach.
Yeah.
You're not a coach, you're something else. And that's okay. Mm-hmm. You're something else, but you're not a coach. Don't bastardize what I do, because that's not coaching, Look, so, I mean, and maybe this is an opportunity for coaches to stand firm in, this is what coaches are, because I know there's really no globally or I guess even industry-wide accepted definition. I know the national board has one, and it's still pretty long, and it's a big, so at the end of the day, we need to stand true to kind of who we are and kind of what coaches do, and not let somebody else, I guess, dilute that down to what it's not, and if you're a coach listening to this, that's not what you want to do, that's completely fine. And I guess legally you can call yourself a coach. There's no regulation around that, but know in your heart of hearts, you're not really coaching. You're doing something else. Right. So look, I mean, when you came on and when you responded to my request, like, hey, all health coaches that are out there doing stuff, cool, I've got this podcast, and you answered me, and you asked, hey, would this be interest? What could I contribute? Because you don't have your own business per se. You're not out there trying to sell anything. You just came on here to share your experience and some thoughts and some advice, and I would venture to say inspiration, I think, for people listening. But if you'd want to, do you have some contact information or a place where people can kind of follow you and who you are? I would love for you to share that.
Sure. I actually have a separate Facebook page called Walk with Coach Diana. So people can contact me there. I'm doing virtual group coaching for free as a community service through that Facebook page. People can connect with me on LinkedIn. And feel free to give them my email as well, Laura, if you want to put it in the notes for the podcast. I would love to connect. Tell you that would fulfill my fantasy. I really want to connect with as many people as possible, because there's that part of me that's that little cheerleader person that wants to, come on, let's all get together. Let's put on a show. Let's do it. So I just love getting people together. So that would be great.
Awesome. Yeah, we'll include that. Thank you so much, Diana. This was such a great conversation. I enjoyed myself.
It was so much fun, ladies. I hope, it would be great to have continued conversations. If I can be of any support to you in your work, please don't hesitate. I'd love to be there.
Absolutely.
Awesome. Yeah. Take you up on that. Thank you so much.
Have a great rest of your day. It was a pleasure to meet you.
Pleasure.
This podcast was brought to you by Primal Health Coach Institute. To learn more about how to become a successful health coach, get in touch with us by visiting primalhealthcoach.com/call. Or if you're already a successful health coach, practitioner, influencer, or thought leader with a thriving business and an interesting story, we'd love to hear from you. Connect with us at hello@primalhealthcoach.com and let us know why we need to interview you for Health Coach Radio. Thanks for listening.